Okay, before we start setting up the rest of the pages, let's also refactor job slice. We're pretty much done with functionality. However, I want to make this file cleaner so it's easier to navigate around. Basically, what we're going to do, we're just going to move this functionality. However, in this case, I'll show you alternative approach. So if you remember in the user slice, we created the functions and then we just returned from the callback function. In this case, I'll show you that we can move the entire function as well. So first, what we want to do is set up Job Thunk in the features in the jobs folder. Then we want to import what we're going to use in these functions. Basically, we just need to take a look what we're using here in the callback function. So it's going to be fetch. It's going to be clear values. So we need to import that since it's not in the same file. And also, if you remember, we imported show loading, hide loading, get all jobs from all jobs slice. So we import all of those things. And then we come up with functions. So in my case, I'll name them exactly the same, but I'll add this thunk. And then we just take the entire functionality. So the entire thing. And the result is going to look something like this, where in the job slice, notice we'll have create async thunk, then name of the action. So job, create job, and edit job, and all that. And then we just pass in create job thunk. And by default, since this is a callback function in create async thunk, it's going to get few parameters if we pass something in when we dispatch, as well as the thunk API. So let's try this out. First, I want to create the file. I'm going to go with job thunk.js. Then let's set up those imports. Like I said, we want to take this one out, and I'll remove them right away from the job slice. There's no point to have them. And then we also want to get the custom fetch. And we also want to import that, what was the name? Clear values, correct? So let's go with clear and then values from the job slice. Then let's set up those functions. So first, let me go with export const, and then it was create job and thunk. Then I'll copy and paste right away. In here, we'll say delete job, and then the last one was edit job thunk. And now let's go back to the job slice. And like I said, we literally want to take the entire thing. So everything starting with async and then ending with the parenthesis, like so. So now we'll just pass in the create job thunk as a callback function. So let me navigate back, copy and paste, and now I have my function. And now we just need to do the same thing with delete job as well as the edit job. So let's take this one out, back in job thunk. Let's set it equal to, yep, this is correct on delete. And then we want to do the same thing with edit. So let's take this, cut it out, and set it equal to our function. So we're exporting all of them right away. So now we just want to save it here, then go back to the job slice and import all of them. So we're going to go here with import, and one by one, we want to get those values. So we want to go with create job thunk. Then we also want to get the delete one, delete job thunk, and let's also get edit job thunk. And probably this was a good use case for auto imports, but oh well. So let's go here with create job thunk. Let's pass it in. Then we also have delete job thunk as well as the edit job thunk. And I'm noticing here that I'm not using this import. So I'm pretty sure that we use it somewhere here. Yep. Where we have create job, we also use the logout user. So let's import that one as well. Now let's save it and test it out whether everything still works. So let me go to add job. I'm going to go with front end. Let's say developer. The company will be Facebook. Let's submit this. Let's see. Yep, job created. So somewhere here, I'm going to have the job. Yep, there it is. Now, if we want, we can edit. So let's go back to the backend developer. Let's submit. Let's test it out one more time. And now we can just remove this job. And if that works, then it looks like our functionality works. Now we just have a cleaner code in the job slice. And while we're still on the topic of refactoring, let's also handle that auth header, because by now you're probably sick of typing this or copy and pasting it. And I'll show you 3 approaches: the file approach, the utils approach, as well as Axios interceptors approach. So I suggest don't follow along. Take a look at the approaches and then decide which one makes the most sense for you. Again, the main goal for all of them is the same. Essentially, we want to somehow create a code where we don't have to repeat ourselves. And instead of typing this each and every time, the headers, authorizations, we just invoke the function or we set up some logic in the interceptor, and hopefully you see where I'm going with this. And the first approach is following, where I can just create a auth header function. And this is happening in the Job Thunk, where I'm going to be looking for Thunk API. And this is a must. Yes, I need to have access to Thunk API in order to access that token. And then instead of setting up that header each and every time, I can just invoke this function. So let me show you with create Job Thunk. And again, I'm not going to add this to each and every request because I'll show you multiple approaches. And then by the end, I'll clean out the code. So first, let's go to a Job Thunk and let's create that function. So we go here with const auth header. At least that's going to be my name. Then we want to pass in Thunk API. And as far as the logic, well, we just want to return that header. So we want to go here with this object and then headers and rest of the code. So let's just go here, return, and cut this thing out. I just need to make sure that I have proper syntax. Copy and paste. So now we're returning this object with the value. So if we want to use it, we just go here with auth header, then invoke it, and let's pass in the Thunk API. So now let me go quickly to the browser and test it. So we're going to go here with, again, front end and developer, I guess. So front end dev, and then the company will be Twitter in this case. Let's submit this. Let's see all the jobs somewhere here. Yep, I have my job. So I know that my functionality works. Otherwise, we would get an error. And we can even take a look at the requests if we want. So let me go to a network. Again, let's try it out. In this case, I'm going to say testing. Then company again will be testing. Let's submit this. Yep, we have a request. And then if we take a look at the request errors, we'll see the authorization bearer and all that. So we know that definitely this approach works. Now, what is the downside of this approach? Well, it's going to work nicely here in this file. But we also need to remember that the same header we'll need to add to update user, for example, or get all jobs, or stats. Effectively, every request that's going to be authenticated is going to be looking for this value. So yes, of course, you can say, well, we can import from this file, but in the next video, I'll show you alternative approach. And after that, let's take a look at the file approach. So since we need to access this in multiple files, even though, yes, we can export that from the Job Thunk, it kind of makes a bit more sense to set it up in utils. For example, you can call it auth header and then export it. And the moment we do that, of course, we can access it in all of the files. So in the README, it looks like I forgot to set up the export, or no, sorry. It looks like I'm exporting here by default, my bad. And then essentially once we set up the function, again, same logic, we pass in the Thunk API, and then we just need to import that in whichever file we want to use. In my case, I'm going to set it up in Job Thunk since I already have the logic in place. But again, I don't suggest setting it up all over your application because there's one more approach that I want to showcase. So let's go to utils. Let's create new file. Let's call this auth header JS. And yes, I'll copy and paste just so I can speed this up. Effectively, I want to get this function. I want to copy and paste, and I want to go with export default, and then auth header. And then back in the Job Thunk, we just need to make one more import. So let's type here auth header, and then we can invoke it again. Let me test it out just so I can see that everything works. Just to stay on the safe side, I will refresh, and then let's pass in some dummy values. In this case, I'm going to be again front-end dev, and then let's call this Amazon. Let's submit. Job created, and then if we navigate to all the jobs, it looks like we were successful. So this is another approach that we can take. Essentially, we set this one up in the utils, and then we can use it all over our application. Okay, and the last approach that I want to showcase is the Axios interceptors approach, where if you remember the Axios tutorial, I covered that there's something called interceptors. And essentially, it's a logic that we can add to the outgoing requests and incoming responses. And we do that by passing in two functions, one for success and one for error. And in this case, we're interested in the outgoing requests. And essentially, we'll grab the user from local storage. Remember, we created this function. And then if the user exists, then we'll just add this authorization header, and we'll set it equal to bearer and token. A quick update: in the current Axios version, the common property returns undefined. So the correct code is headers, and then we straight away need to go for authorization header. Basically, we need to omit the common property. If you need a reference, README contains the correct code. And at the very end, we return the config. And now what's going to happen that every time we'll use custom fetch, if the user exists in a local storage, we'll automatically add it. And what that means is that we can just go through our application and effectively remove that authorization header from all the authenticated requests. We won't need to use this anymore. And also, if you remember the Axios tutorial, I mentioned that, yes, of course, we can add this to a default one as well. Basically, we can add this to all the instances. However, I don't suggest doing that because in that case, you're not controlling where this token is going. In this case, we create this custom instance. We know that this is always going to be going back to this server. So in that case, yes, it makes total sense to add this token if the user exists, because that way we don't need to worry about those authenticated requests. We know that if there's a user, we're always going to add the token. But if you're going to add this to a default one, then you don't know where this token is going. So first, let's start by navigating to the Axios, and we have already custom fetch, but why don't we get, or you know what, let's use the auto import. So let's set up those interceptors. We'll say with custom fetch, so that's my instance, then we'll go with interceptors. In this case, we're only interested in the request, so the outgoing requests, and then we want to pass in two functions. Now, honestly, as far as the error, we can even skip it. Since we're not going to add any kind of logic, let's just add one function. And this is going to be for successful request. And as far as the setup, we'll start by coming up with parameter, in my case config. And of course, we right away need to return that config as well. Otherwise, this logic is not going to work. So we'll go here with config. So we're returning the config, but we also want to check if the user exists in a local storage. Then we want to attach that header. So first, let's go with const user is equal to, and then the function is get user from local storage. Remember, it's a function. We invoke it. If we're successful, we get back the object. And if not, I already forgot. So let me quickly double check. If not, then we return a null. Okay, so that makes sense. Now let's check if the user exists. And if that's the case, now let's go with config. So that's the object that we're going to be returning. Then the property is headers, then common. And now we just need to come up with a name of the header. and it is no other than authorization header. And then we're going to go with bearer, and let's access the token. Again, the nice thing about this one is that you only need to set up this once. You don't need to copy and paste. And by doing so, essentially we're avoiding some unnecessary bugs. Let's say you copy and paste and then something went wrong. Maybe some syntax is not correct. So now what we want to do is to find all our authenticated requests and remove that header. So I think I'm going to start with user thunk. Let me find it here. Notice we have the header. We don't need it anymore. Again, we are using custom fetch, so it's happening by default. Then up next, we have Job Thunk. Same deal. We can actually remove the import for the auth header. We're not going to invoke the function either. At least that's going to be my approach. Let me find the headers here. Yep, we want to remove this one as well. Let's keep on moving. And then we have one more. We have the same deal in the all job slice because this one was protected route as well. So let me find get all jobs and we can remove it as well. Now let me go back to the application and test it out whether everything works. I don't think I'm gonna showcase the network tab just so it's faster. And let me just try one more time to add some kind of job. So say Axios stuff working, just so I can see. And let's call this Axios. Let's submit. Okay. Job was created, which pretty much means that we are in good shape. Let's go to all jobs. Somewhere here we have Axios stuff working. So let's edit that. Let's remove working part. Let's submit one more time. Yep. Job is modified. If I go here now, I have Axios stuff. And of course I can delete it as well. And I don't see the job. And if I want to change the profile, I'm just going to go here and I'm going to switch it back to John. Let's save it. Yep. User is updated as well. And well, that means that our functionality works and we have this authentication header logic only in one place, only in the Axios.js. The last thing that I want to mention in this video is the simple fact that we still have this logout user. Now I added this one for the update user, as well as I believe, let me just double check. I believe I added here for the create job, but then I missed out on delete job, edit job, as well as get all jobs. And in my case, eventually I will add to all of these requests, but we will do this later on. So let's just finish the application and then we'll worry about refactoring this code. So we have logic in one place and then we can reuse it all over our application. Okay. Before we start setting up the stats page, let's also quickly figure out how we can have more jobs data. Basically, it's going to be easier to see all of the functionality. Now, technically, you don't have to. It's not going to change the outcome. You can set up the entire functionality with even only one job in the database. But it's just going to be easier to see all of the functionality if you have more jobs. And in order to achieve that, you have two options. Either you can just head back to add job and just set up some dummy values here. Add at least, I would say 11 jobs because we have 10 jobs per page. Or there's another approach where you can use the test user I specifically set up for this purpose. And basically, you'll just need to log in with these credentials. So test user at test.com and the password is secret. And then you'll have more data. Effectively, I just added a bunch of dummy data. However, the user is read-only, meaning you won't be able to change the profile, add the job, or edit the job or delete the job, since I don't want some bad actors to post some nasty stuff, effectively tamper with my data. But you'll be definitely able to access more data because I set up way more jobs. And I think it's going to be easier to showcase that. Let me go back to the browser. I'm going to log out. We want to go back to the login. Again, the credentials are test user at and then test.com. And as far as the password, we want to go here with secret. We log in. Notice we have welcome back test user. And just to show you, notice if we go to profile and try to save changes, we'll have test user read only. So you won't be able to do CRUD operations. However, once you navigate to the jobs, you'll notice 10 jobs in this case. So we're still sending back the first page. Don't worry, we'll work on a pagination a little bit later. But why it's so useful is because once we'll be setting up the stats, as well as the filter functionality and the pagination, we'll have more data. And basically, as far as I remember, in the test user, I have 75 jobs. So we can set up both pages with this user, the stats and all jobs, effectively complete the all jobs. And then, of course, you can switch back to whatever user you were working with. Now, again, let me repeat, the functionality is going to work regardless. So you can set up both of these pages with just one job. It's just going to be easier to see everything in action if you have more jobs. And that's why I suggest using that test user. Just remember that you won't be able to use any of the CRUD functionality. So if I'll try to edit, if I'll try to delete, it's not going to work. And that is on purpose because, again, this is available to everyone. Now, what also we can do, we can set up a demo user. So what am I talking about? If we go to a login register, we can set up a button that says demo. And essentially, it just dispatches a login with the values that I just mentioned. So test user and secret. So once we click here, notice we right away log in as test user. Again, we won't be able to do any CRUD functionality, but we'll nicely be able to see what the application is all about. And in order to set up that demo, we simply want to go to register. And right after the submit button, we want to create another button. We want to go type button, class name, and let's add here a different color. So that's why it's going to be a button hipster. Then disabled will be equal to is loading, same as the submit. And then let's dispatch login user. However, in this case, we're not going to be grabbing the values from the state. Let me double check. Is it the local state or the store? I already forgot. Let me quickly see. So register. Yeah, this is the local state. So we're not going to be grabbing from the local state. We'll hard code them. We'll say test user at test.com as well as the password. So let me navigate there to the register and then let's keep on scrolling. Right after the submit one, let's set up the button. And you know what? I think it's going to be faster if I just copy and paste. It's not going to be a type submit. We're going to go with button. Then let's add that different color. So we're shooting for button hipster. Then disable loading. Yep, that is still the same. Now, if we're loading, then dot. And then if we're not loading, we'll just say demo or demo app, whatever you want to write here. And then also let's set up the on click. And then once we click the button, we want to dispatch. And let's go with login. So login user, I believe. And then in here, let's pass in the email. So that one is equal to test user. So I need to go here with uppercase test user at test.com. And then also we have the password. So we'll say here password, and that one is equal to the secret. So let's say here secret. Let's save it. Now let me navigate back to the browser, then log out, and we should see the demo app. And then once we click, of course, we can log in with a test user and start working on the stats page.